Now it is time to discuss the week's big issues. Joining me live are Liberal MP Andrew Wallace and Labor MP Peter Murphy. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining me. Andrew, we'll start with you. Let's begin with the lockdown in Melbourne. Do you believe that this is a proportionate response? Should the lockdown cover the entire state or just be centralised to Greater Melbourne and the Bendigo areas where the cases are centralised?
I couldn't hear whether that was directed at me, and I just lost the audio for a second.
It was directed at you, Andrew. It looks like you've got quite a lot going on there in a park. Well, I'll ask you that question again. Let's talk about the outbreak in Victoria. Do you think that the response, a 7-day lockdown, is proportionate for the whole state when the cases seem to be centralised in Greater Melbourne and Bendigo?
Well, Danica, as every government, state and federal, has managed this pandemic throughout this crisis, every government has acted on the best advice of the medical experts, and I have no doubt that the Victorian government is acting on the best advice from their Chief Health Officer. So we can only rely on that advice. We've stood the test of time. We've done extremely well as a country, and that's not going to change now.
Peter, 4 cases in Melbourne today. Does that justify a 7-day lockdown?
The state government has to act on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, and that's what they've done from day one, and I am confident that's what they'll keep doing. Can I also say it's slightly distracting that it appears behind Andrew is a horse that is neighing or something? Would that possibly be right?
We are looking for a...
Andrew?
Sorry, Peter.
Andrew, is there...
What?
Andrew, Peter would like to ask you a question. Let's first ask you, Andrew, where you are at the moment.
Where are you? Where are you?
I am at the magnificent Mullaney show, the best show in the whole country, where country meets the city, and I've got the Mullaney Light Horse Troop behind me right now.
Okay.
There you go. Never say I didn't give you an opportunity to spruik your electorate, Andrew.
That's it. Peter, I'll ask you just on the lockdown itself. Are you worried about the impact that this might have on businesses? This is the first lockdown in Victoria where there is no JobKeeper subsidy. Are you worried that some businesses won't survive the next 7 days?
Oh, I am. I'm very worried. We've heard estimates of $1 billion worth of economic damage from this lockdown. This is what we were concerned about, in part, by saying to the federal government and the Prime Minister, like, we cannot act as though everything is fine, COVID is finished, and the economy will just keep going in a linear direction. You know, people will need support. There's business support. There's obvious concerns about people's physical and mental health. And it is, given that this has escaped quarantine, we don't have a national quarantine facility or strategy, and the vaccine rollout is so far behind schedule, it's not just the state government's responsibility to help businesses and people in this situation, it's absolutely the federal government's responsibility too.
Andrew, do you think that the federal government should chip in here and help prop up businesses who are now again affected by a lockdown?
Well, Danica, the federal government has spent $291 billion in propping up Australian businesses around the country. $45 billion of that is for businesses and employees in Victoria alone. The federal government has done absolutely the heavy lifting when it comes to providing support to businesses around the country. I absolutely do not accept the suggestion that Peter made that the federal government doesn't have a national strategy to deal with this. I mean, the federal government and the state and territory governments met when this pandemic first reared its ugly head in March of last year, and all territory and state premiers, together with the Prime Minister, agreed that they would adopt this approach. State governments are responsible for public health. State governments, it was agreed at that meeting that state governments would be responsible for organising the quarantine for people coming into this country in hotel quarantine. And as the Prime Minister has repeatedly said, hotel quarantine has seen some 500,000 people come back in. 99.99%. So, Danica, no one could say that the hotel quarantine system hasn't worked, because it has.
All right.
Yes, they can. There's been leaks across the country, and we're in a 7-day lockdown in Victoria because of a leak.
Peter, system.
That's not saying it's working.
No system can ever be fault-proof. If you look at where we are as a nation,
if we had fit-for-purpose quarantine systems, it would be so much better.
People are able to enjoy a lifestyle in this country second to none. Now, there are always going to be outbreaks. COVID is always going to be with us. And for as long as people, for as long as vaccines... That's right. No, that's absolutely right.
Hasn't been rolled out properly.
That's wrong as well. We are getting 4 million people vaccinated today. Every single day that goes by, we're seeing an increase in the number of vaccinations.
All right, I'm going to interrupt you there.
I know you're not a horrible person, but you're at a show in your community where people are enjoying themselves, and my community is in lockdown. Right? My community is in lockdown, so they're allowed to say things aren't going perfectly and the federal government should do better.
Well, let's talk about the vaccine rollout. Peter, there appears that vaccine hesitancy is an issue. What's happening in Victoria? Why are people, up until now, not really lining up to get that vaccine, at least their first dose?
Well, there's a couple of things that have fed into it. One is they heard the Prime Minister and the government say it's not a race, we're not in a rush, we can take our time, things are good here. They heard the concerns about side effects of vaccines, and they didn't get, extraordinarily, they didn't get a really smart, well-targeted education and public health campaign like the ones that we've seen in the UK and the USA and other places about getting vaccinated. And there has also been, it's not just vaccine hesitancy, there's been a real difficulty in getting vaccines. I've got a nurse working in the Baxter Retirement Village in my electorate in the high care part of the aged care facility who is still trying to get a vaccine and has been told 30th of June. 2 days ago, 10 people called a GP in Frankston South trying to get vaccinated and got told by the clinic that the next federal arrival of vaccines wouldn't be for 2 weeks and they should call back in 2 weeks. So there are real problems, and it's not just one simple issue, but there's a lot of work to be done and to be done quickly.
Peter, unfortunately, the ALP continues to weaponise this issue. Now, this is a time when Australians should be pulling together. And, the Labor Party are fighting the government when we need to be fighting the virus.
Andrew, I just got to interrupt you there because just on that point about vaccines, this week we also saw the acting Victorian Premier. He called out the federal government saying that the vaccine rollout has been too slow. Is this lockdown the fault of the federal government?
No, I don't accept that at all. The rollout has, if you look at it, we've been saying this every time that we've been talking every Friday, Danica. There's always, when a vaccine rollout occurs, when a project of this significance happens, it's always going to start off slowly. But what we're seeing day upon day upon day is increasing numbers of vaccines being delivered to Australians across the country. Yesterday we had our highest number of people being vaccinated, around about 105,000 people being vaccinated in just one day.
Okay, but 2.5% of the population has had 2 doses, 2.5%. So could this lockdown have been avoided had that vaccine rollout been sped up and on time as scheduled?
Well, Danica, the message we need to be getting out to every Australian is to go and enrol, go and get your vaccines, register for your vaccines. I registered for my vaccine just a couple of days ago, and I got my first vaccine today, this morning, in my own electorate. So, there may be certain parts of the electorate, or the country, I should say, that there may be some supply issues, and we've talked about those supply issues from day one. But the reality is, where the federal government has invested in the supply of 195 million vaccine shots. And we'll continue to roll those out to all Australians But what we need, the message we need to be getting out today is to don't wait. Go out and get your vaccine. And if you're not eligible for the vaccine today, you can still register for it. And as soon as you are eligible, then they'll be in touch with you.
All right. I'm sure that message is bipartisan and has bipartisan support. We have to leave it there. Peter Murphy,
Absolutely.
Andrew Wallace, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me.
And make sure you come to the
Have a good
Millennium Show
weekend
tomorrow.
Yeah, just watch that horse in the background there, Andrew. Thank you.